Welcome to tonight's webinar. My name is Melanie McKinney, Programs Coordinator for CAN-DO Multiple Sclerosis. Thank you for acting on the belief that you are more than your MS by attending tonight's webinar, Cooling Techniques and Devices, with CAN-DO Programs Consultant Beth Bolliard, Occupational Therapist, and Peter Demiri, Senior Director of Programs for the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America. Before starting tonight's presentation, I'd like to talk a little about CAN-DO Multiple Sclerosis. CAN-DO MS is an innovative provider of lifestyle empowerment programs for people living with MS and their support partners. We are the start of a whole new way of thinking about and living with MS. CAN-DO MS empowers people to move beyond their MS by giving them the knowledge, skills, tools, and confidence to adopt healthy lifestyle behaviors, actively co-manage their disease, and live their best lives. In 2010, CAN-DO MS launched its new website, www.mscando.org. Please visit the website where you can register for upcoming webinars, listen to our archived webinars, check out our CAN-DO MS lifestyle empowerment programs, including our CAN-DO 4-day programs and Jumpstart 1-day programs. You can share your CAN-DO promise and learn ways you can contribute to or get involved with CAN-DO MS. A few housekeeping items before we get started this evening. Our presenters will address questions and comments at the end of the presentation, and we encourage questions and comments throughout the presentation. To ask a question, type your question in the chat feature located on the left of your computer screen. To submit a question, type in the small box that says Chat with Presenters. This presentation is being recorded and will be archived on CAN-DO MS's website. You are more than welcome to view the presentation again, and if you've missed one of our other webinars, you can find the archived version on our website. For those of you who are attending live tonight, you will receive an email tomorrow with copies of the PowerPoint presentation. New in 2001, you can listen to the live webinar through your computer speakers rather than having to call in. So the job of the participants tonight is to, 1, submit your questions and comments in the chat box, 2, complete the evaluation at the end of the webinar, and 3, review the webinar schedule and register for the upcoming webinars. And we have 2 great speakers lined up for tonight's webinar. Beth Bolliard has practiced occupational therapy for over 22 years. Her area of expertise is adult neurological rehabilitation with a specialty in MS. Beth is employed at Northern Colorado Rehabilitation Hospital as the Patient Assessment Coordinator and as the Director of Case Management. And we also have Peter Demiri with us this evening. He is the Senior Director of Programs for the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America, which is located in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. MSAA offers programs and services to provide assistance to people with MS and their support partners, including the Cooling Device Program, which will be discussed this evening. So before we get started, we'd like to learn more about you. Let's do a quick survey just to get a feel for who's on the webinar with us this evening. I just put a survey up on the screen. So if you can let us know if you're a person living with MS, a support partner, healthcare professional, or other. Great, it looks like an overwhelming percentage are people with MS, and we've got some support partners, which is fantastic. So with that, I will turn this over to Beth and Peter. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I'm happy to join tonight and do this. I'm glad you guys are here. Let's review the webinar objectives. Tonight we're going to review the basic principles around nerve conduction. We're going to discuss how and why temperature changes have an effect on function, understand how to determine your body's core temperature, going to be able to identify internal and external factors that may contribute to core temperature change. You're going to learn strategies for easing the effects of heat and temperature sensitivity. And you're going to hear about MSAA's cooling products and cooling program. So what a great time to talk about this. I know we all in many parts of the country have experienced record temperatures already, and it's just the beginning of spring. So who knows what our summer has. So temperature sensitivity and MS. Good topic, and as you can see why. 60 to 80% of individuals living with MS experience some sort of heat intolerance, but not all. And cold can also worsen MS symptoms for some people. And then there are those individuals who are sensitive to either type of temperature change. So how did we discover this heat issue, and where did it come from? Well, there was a German ophthalmologist, and in the 1890s he was studying neurological patients with optic neuritis. And he noticed that their vision got worse after exercise. So lo and behold, here we are thinking exercise is bad for you, right? Well, no. They did a little more discovery, and they found out that actually it's the rise in the core body temperature rather than the act of exercise. So don't quit your gym just yet. In this body temperature rise, they used that to eventually do the hot bath tests that were done up into even the 50s that diagnosed MS. They would immerse a person in the hot bath and see what happened with the nerve conduction and how they responded, and that was one of the ways they diagnosed individuals with MS. Fortunately enough today, our medical technology has gotten a little bit more specific and easier to handle than sitting in a hot bath, huh? Let's talk about nerve conduction. Here's a picture of a happy little nerve. Okay? So I have my cell body. This is where an impulse is coming in and it needs to travel out, and it's going to travel down this axon, just like so. And this myelin sheath, or these Schwann cells, that's what protects that axon. And what that allows it to do is it insulates it and allows that nerve impulse to move efficiently and effectively down the axon, just as so. So that's the way that a good, normal, healthy nerve works. So let's talk about the different types of nerve. Here we have our healthy nerve. It's got its myelin sheath. This red line is indicating that nerve conduction. You see it's moving smoothly and simply. Now here's a nerve that is scarred because of MS. As we know with MS, the myelin is what gets attacked. So as the nerve conducts, the impulse is slowed because it has to negotiate around these scarred areas. And that can, again, slow the impulse. It can also cause a misfiring or a no firing, and things just don't work out the way that we intended them to. Legs don't move the way they want. Sometimes we don't think the things we want because the nerves just aren't all adding up there. So we put the effects of temperature on these nerves. Any one of us can feel the effects of temperature, and it can slow that nerve impulse. But if you look at an individual with MS whose nerve impulse is already slowed because of the scar myelin, that makes that conduction even slower. So what happens is they say a temperature elevation of just as little as 1/4 to 1/2 degree can slow that nerve conduction even further, worsening the symptoms. You've got to know that this symptom worsening is temporary, and that when your body cools, you'll return to what you have as your normal level of function. It's really important to know that heat does not cause an exacerbation of the disease process. Symptoms that are most commonly affected: people experience blurred vision. They experience weakness, maybe in one extremity or two, or throughout the entire body. You can have decreased balance, which hinders your ability to ambulate. Numbness in one extremity or in your trunk. If you're an individual who experiences some sort of tremor, it could get worse. Definitely people become fatigued. And then obviously the nerve synapses serve every part of our body, so if things aren't firing well, sometimes we're not thinking as well, and we have cognitive function issues. Now, what do I expect? Everybody says, well, what do I expect? Well, we all know that MS is an individual type disease, and someone's response to heat is just equally that. Each of us has our own individual threshold to how hot we're able to tolerate and how humid we're able to tolerate. The symptoms that we experience can be very different from person to person. The severity of the symptoms can be different. And then the amount of time that it causes, that we need to resolve the issue is also different. Let's look at some things that can cause heat issues. Internally, if we run a fever, let's say you're having a urinary tract infection or you're sick and your body temperature rises due to fever, that can affect your function. If you're an individual who has any hormonal issues or changes going on, those types of flashes throughout your body that change your temperature can impact your function. I have a friend, this is really funny, I'll tell a story when I'm at hot flashes, because she was in her 50s and she was experiencing that. And that she would keep going to her refrigerator, and she'd open it, and she'd pull out one of those body sprays that you can pick up at any store, Bed Bath & Beyond, and she was spraying her body. And I'm like, gosh, that's really neat. She says, yeah. She says, I get these hot flashes, and so she keeps that body spray in her fridge, and that way when she sprays it on, it's a nice smell, but it also cools her off. So that's pretty neat, since I have one in my fridge too now. We eat spicy foods. We drink hot beverages. That can affect our body temperature. Sometimes if we're not dressed for the event, if we come in we're overdressed, our body's not able to evaporate heat. We're not able to perspire and cool ourselves, and so that can cause you to overheat. Activity does raise the body temperature. Not that it's a bad thing, but we have to look at how we do it well and we do it smartly. So exercise per se, if you're thinking about physical exercise, can raise your body temperature, as well as any daily activities. If we're moving through the house and we're doing laundry, or definitely if we're in the kitchen cooking, all of those things can change your body temperature. Humidity is another one that can be a big factor. I fortunately live in the West, so humidity is not as much of an issue, but I grew up in the South, and I certainly know exactly what it can do for you. Direct sunlight. Sometimes being in the direct sunlight can zap that energy even further than just experiencing the high temperatures. Warm kitchens or warm rooms. You'd be amazed how much appliances, even computers and televisions, put off heat and energy. So if you have a lot of those electronics in your rooms, it can really affect the temperature in the room. So a lot of times I say save energy in your bill by unplugging it when you're not using it, because it definitely does put off heat. Obviously being near a fire, be it a one outside or a wood-burning stove, can affect your body temperature. Pools, hotter than 85 degrees. We find that individuals with MS do well in pool exercises and working in pools, but the temperature of the pool needs to be that 85 or under. And then of course if you're in a sauna or a hot tub, that's going to raise your body temperature. So what's normal for you? The average body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius, or what we say 98.6. But each one of us functions at a different level. I'm a 97.4 gal. And how you figure this out is you want to get your baseline temperature. What you're going to do is you're going to use the same method to measure the same device for 7 days. And you're going to take your temperature over that 7 days, and then you're going to average those. And then that will establish what your core body temperature is. You need to make sure that you always do it at the same time of day and you always use the same way to measure. Now when we look at using cooling techniques, the maximum reduction of temperature that's safe is 2 degrees Fahrenheit, bringing your body temperature down 2 degrees under that normal for you. And really in the studies they found that a 1% reduction in the temperature was sufficient for people to see benefits. So I say benefits. What are those? Well, a lot of medical studies have determined that when the demyelinated nerve is cooled, you picture that nerve with the myelin sheath gone, and it's having its issues with the transmissions. It's cooled. It slows the speed of that electrical signal. And what happens is when it slows that speed, it gives that nerve a more opportunity to jump over those scarred areas. It lengthens the duration in which it's able to conduct. So it allows greater signal strength and opportunity to transmit over damaged nerves. So I simply say cooling allows for greater signal strength to transmit over damaged nerves. So that's why. Now, we're getting that signal strength that's going over those nerves. How does that impact function? Well, in research studies, they've demonstrated that individuals who participate in cooling therapy have seen benefits up to 2 hours after the sessions and ongoing with regular therapy. The participants in these studies reported they had less fatigue, they were able to stay outdoors and engaged in the activities they were choosing for longer periods of time. They saw a lessened effect of their increased body temperature while they were performing the activity. All good things. So let's talk about some ways to keep it cool. If you've met one OT, you've met us all, and we're all about planning and preparing, so I've got to have a slide about that. Being successful in life and being successful in beating the heat and is to know what's coming. So you've got to be aware of what are the current weather forecasts, what's the temperature going to be, when's the heat of the day, and what am I doing during that time. So just kind of understanding what do I want to take on and what's the environment in which I need to function. Are there times I can stay indoors during the heat of the day? I read an article about a gentleman with MS that really wanted to go on this vacation to Greece. And he came back and he was saying how wonderful it was. And he was so worried when he went because he thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be out in that sunlight and I'm going to get drained and I'm going to end up in my room and I'm not going to be able to enjoy the evenings because I'm going to get zapped. And what he did was he got up in the mornings and they walked out and did a lot of touring early mornings and late cool mornings. And then they would go in and have lunch. And where some people would go to the pool or they go out in the heat, he went back to the hotel room, had a really nice nap, hung out, read his book. And then when it came time for dinner and evening and dancing, he was back out again. And he said he had more energy in the night and saw more and did more than a lot of the people who chose to lay in the sun and dehydrate themselves. So definitely does work. The other thing is knowing where you're going and what's available to you. Does the venue have air conditioning? Is there covered parking? How accessible is it? What are the challenges I'm going to have so I can be prepared? Cooling yourself before you go. Can you use a cooling device or engage in one of the things we're going to talk about in a little bit to actually bring that core temperature down a degree before you go out and engage? And then once you're out doing an activity, make sure you schedule time to rest. Schedule time to sit down and pull yourself out of the sun or out of where you are and cool. Take a cool down break. Even if you don't feel like you need a physical rest break, you're taking the cool down break. And then, of course, having the tools you need for success. If you determine that iced wristbands or a certain type of hat or an umbrella are things that are successful for you, then making sure you have them when you need them. And then I had someone who said, well, you know, it's great. I have all these things, but I always forget to take them with me. So what she decided to do is she has a bag in her car and a bag in her house. And since some of these items aren't very expensive, she just doubled up. And she had them on both sides, so she'd always have it when she needed it. Hydration is definitely the key to a lot of this. So if you guys are at home and everyone has a drink in front of you, I want you to pick it up and take a sip of it right now. The reason being is our bodies release heat through sweat and evaporation. So we have to have adequate fluid intake to allow the body to perspire yet remain hydrated. And I know sometimes it's a challenge for some of us if we have other issues dealing with our bladder and we don't want to our mobility and it's difficult going to the bathroom. A lot of times we limit how much we're drinking, but that's really not the answer. You've got to keep your body hydrated. You've got to keep your body healthy. And if you need to deal with other issues with your medical professionals, I would attack it from that direction. But really, please don't limit your fluids as a coping mechanism for any other of the issues that you may have. Limiting your caffeinated drinks. You want to make sure that that actually dehydrates your body. And you want to make sure you have plenty of chilled drinks on hand. A lot of the sports drinks and other things you can stick in the freezer and then take with you so they'll sort of defrost as the day goes on. Just make sure if you fill them up, you leave room for them to expand and not bust the container. The other thing is when we talk about humidity, I know I mentioned it before. When our bodies, the way that the human body releases heat is through sweat and evaporation. So when you're in an area where it's humid, humidity is moisture in the air. So although we're sweating, the evaporation of the sweat on your skin can't evaporate. It can't cool. The actual cooling element happens when it evaporates. And so when you're in a climate that has a lot of humid air, a lot of moisture in the air, it lessens the ability for that evaporation to occur. And that's why humidity feels that much more zapping. That's why it's harder to deal with it. You know, instead of the sweat evaporating off your skin, it's just rolling down your body. I know we can all attest to feeling that at some point in our lives. Okay, let's beat the heat. We talked about some of the frozen juices and sports drinks and keeping them in the freezer and letting them defrost as you go on. You know, spring and summer is a great time for very healthy smoothies, whether they're made from vegetables or fruits. Popsicles, there's a lot of good popsicles on the market. A lot of them come sugar-free, or the fudgesicles don't have a whole lot of calories, so they can not, you know, hinder your diet or your health plan by having those. Summer's a great time to have fresh salads with fruits in them and nuts and eat some soups like a cucumber soup or a gazpacho. There's lots of soups you can make that are cool. Definitely sandwich night. And then I talked a lot about cool meals. You know, don't heat up the kitchen at all. You can so often pick up rotisserie chicken or something else at the grocery store and come home and have them do that cooking for you and then make a salad out of it or make a sandwich out of it. Eat outside on the patio. Use the grill instead of the kitchen. A lot of times what I do is we'll grill a lot of meats on the weekends, and then we save sections of them during the week, so that way that's our meat we can add to whatever it is we're making, and we don't have to mess up any dishes or cook much or heat up the kitchen, and it makes it a lot easier. Clothing. Obviously you know that dark colored clothing is going to attract the heat, so you want to pack away your black shirts for summer and pull out your light colors, your yellows and your whites. You want to make sure that your clothes is a breathable material. There's so many nice materials on the market and a lot of sportswear that has the wick-away properties and the breathing properties, so I would steer towards some of those, and they're very lightweight. Laying your clothing is definitely a key. You know, it's nice to have maybe a tank top and then a longer sleeve top on that and a light jacket that you can switch in and out whenever you need to. I know in Colorado the temperature changes significantly very quickly, so layers are definitely a way of life out here. But you got to remember, even if you're in the South, they're very good about keeping that air conditioning super cold. So you may be in somewhere where you're freezing, but the minute you're going to go outside into 90-degree heat, so you want to be able to adjust quickly. There's a lot of ways that you can moisten items and refrigerate them so they can be cooling devices. A big one is those basketball wristbands, or even one that can go on your forehead, or a t-shirt, a bandana, scarves. I've known people that will moisten a shirt and stick it in the refrigerator, and then they'll go out and wear it while they're doing their gardening or mowing the lawn. Some people even did their bathing suits that way before they went to the pool. So that's one way that you can moisten some products and wear them that will kind of keep you cool while you're outside, and it's not costly at all. Have it made in the shade. That direct sunlight, personally for me it's quite zapping. I get intimidated by all the overlight sunlight. But it's important to kind of step out of that and keep yourself covered. Wearing a nice hat, but make sure that your hat again is a breathable material, that potentially it's vented. They even have hats that have cooling properties in them that you could wear. Umbrellas are great ways to mask the direct sunlight if you needed to go to an event or you wanted to go to an event outside. Again, just make sure that it's a light colored umbrella, and then hopefully it also has some of the venting properties, because if you just stick under it and it doesn't, that tends to make you sweat and heat up even more. Look at the outdoor spaces that you like to enjoy. Is there ways to cover them with either a pergola or a sail, a fabric sail, or an umbrella so that it makes it more enjoyable to be outside? The direction of the sun. I always say east, west, north, south. How is your home set up, and where are your patio spaces? And it's nice to create little vignettes on either side. The western sun is so strong in the evening, so it's nice to sit back out east. But in the mornings, the sun comes up in the east, so maybe it's nice to sit somewhere on the west side of your home to enjoy coffee and read the paper. So that way you're able to get out, but you're paying attention to where that sun intensity is. Making sure that you're in the shade with your car, or can you pull into the garage, or better yet, get dropped off. Some individuals I know, the car is an issue because it sits outside, and even though you put the little shade in the window and you pull the windows down, it's still super hot in there. So I know some people that have gotten the self-starters, so they'll get their car started and the air conditioning's on and let it run for a bit before they get in it, and that doesn't impact them as much. Sometimes tinting windows, if there's transoms or upper windows in your house that tend to get that glare in, tinting can be an option for you. There are several misting products and fans on the market that can make being outside fun. You'll see them in home improvement stores where they're tubes and they have little holes on them, and it sends out this nice, fine, cool mist. And you can put them around your decks. You can make a doorway of them and walk through them. There's some that have fans on them. There's even little personal cool misting products you can use, and that's a nice way to put that cold, wet water on you that then, of course, evaporates, again, cooling you off. Okay, we're going to ask you a question now. The question is, do you currently use any cooling device? It's coming in. It looks like the no's are having it. So we've got about 44 say yes and about 63 say no. So we'll see at the end here if you guys decide some things you might want to pick up or try. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Peter, and he's going to talk about devices.
Great. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, everybody. Great to be here. Before I get into my presentation, I want to tell a quick little story that has a lot of points that Beth had made about being prepared, trying to have a plan, and trying to be smart about it. If heat intolerance is something that does affect you and your MS, that you do want to have a plan and try not to be in the heat, especially in the midday. But, you know, sometimes best plans go awry, as they say. As part of our organization, we sponsor educational programs across the country, and we have great top neurologists that present. And a few years ago, we had Dr. Elliot Froman out of UT Southwestern in Dallas present, and he talked about different symptoms, and heat intolerance was one of them. And he told this story that it was very funny and timely at the same time. He had a patient of his who had the air conditioning unfortunately break in his car, and it was in August in Texas. And he needed to go out and do some errands, so he planned ahead, and he made sure that everything he could do in the early morning hours, and he was going to be home by lunch and be in the air conditioning. As Murphy's Law has it, you know, he got delayed, and unfortunately he did not get out of his appointments until the mid-afternoon. So by that point, the temperatures were approaching over 100 degrees, and as he was driving home, he almost made it home. He was approaching his development. As Beth mentioned, the different symptoms can affect heat, and the weakness in his legs were affected, and he could not get his foot off the accelerator and onto the brake in time, and unfortunately drove right through his neighbor's kitchen window. And fortunately, everybody was fine. Nobody was hurt, although I don't think the kitchen window did too well, as then the neighbor had a big car stuck in its house. So obviously, he was very shocked at this. They called 911 and the police, and they came. The neighbor, didn't really know the MS client and thought that, maybe the person had a little too much to drink or something was really wrong with the person. And in waiting for the police to arrive, the MS patient went into the living room and sat down in the cool air conditioning. And by the time the police came, he was fine. He got up. He was walking around. He had no ill effects of heat and humidity. And everybody was looking at him like, what the heck just happened? And he explained, because of my MS, the heat really affects me, and I got caught out into the hot sun, and I didn't mean to, and it just happened. And the police kind of looked at him like, yeah, right, buddy, sure, I heard this. So he actually had to call Dr. Froman, and Dr. Froman got on the phone and had to go through the whole UTOF's explanation that Beth mentioned, and Dr. Froman loves to get on and really talk about MS. So I think a half hour later, the police finally understood all about MS and heat intolerance, and everything was fine. So it was just kind of a story that I remember from the presentation about, the definite effects that heat and humidity can have on people with MS and the absolute need to plan ahead. So with my presentation, Beth mentioned great techniques to keep cool, so I'm going to talk about some devices to keep cool. So where did some of these cooling devices and apparel come from? It actually came from the NASA Space Department. Back in the early 60s, when NASA was hitting its stride and they were starting to do spacewalks, they had to create, obviously, space suits for the astronauts. And if you put on a very large, heavy suit, it's going to naturally just trap your body temperature inside the suit. So you could sustain that for a little bit, but for long periods of time, you would become overheated, much like people with MS. So they had to come up with some type of system to try and kind of refrigerate, basically, a person inside a spacesuit. So what they came up with was called liquid cooling garments. So this product, which looks like a long john underwear suit, actually has tubes and connectors inside it, and it was worn by the astronauts to have cool liquid circulated by pumps through this suit so that it actually would cool the person. And it actually became very successful, and as the technology continued, NASA worked to refine this technology and use it in a variety of different applications in the military and in industrial applications and biomedical research. And part of NASA's charter is that the technology that they create for the space program should also be looked at in practical everyday applications for consumers as well. So with this system of cooling, they found out that this does have some benefits for other medical conditions and for chemotherapy, children with HED, and individuals with MS. As MSAA had grown over the 80s and into the 90s, we were looking for new projects, new ways to assist people with MS, and we were approached by some of these cooling companies that had worked initially with NASA on the cooling garments, and they asked us if we would be interested in expanding this and collaborating with NASA and working on some projects to really study this and get more of an MS focus on this cooling. So we were very honored, and we did agree. And as a result, we had a memorandum of understanding, and that was for several years, and it led to some very scientific projects across the country in different MS centers, including the Rocky Mountain MS Center out there in Colorado. And with that, the notoriety of cooling in MS became more known in the MS circles among the healthcare professionals and the neurology community, and it really became looked at as a benefit. I think the neurology community did know all along that heat does poorly affect people with MS, and they generally knew that cooling was going to help people with MS, but they weren't quite sure to what extent and to what degree and how it could be applied and how it could be measured. So, that's where some of the research was that we came in. So with that research, again, as the technology developed, different manufacturers were taking what initially was developed in the 60s and 70s and really refining it and making it smaller and more user-friendly. So they came up with the system of the vest that had the tubes in it that circulated cool liquid, but they made them smaller so it could fit around the torso and not be so cumbersome, and it kind of became known as the active cool suits because they would actively pump the cool liquid through the suit. And to do that, you would use a cooler, and there's a variety of different models that different manufacturers use, but really it's no different than any cooler you would take to the beach or the playground, and it had a small pump that was adapted to it, and it would circulate the cool liquid to it. Now, there are obviously pros and cons with a lot of things, and part of cooling there's pros and cons. So these types of active cooling systems are generally expensive. When MSAA first started in the 90s and into 2000s, these products generally were several $1,000s, $2,000 to $3,000, and weren't, and unfortunately still are not covered by insurance. But as technology has improved and as supplies have gotten better, these are coming down in price. They're still $500, $600, $700 in that range, so they still are expensive. But it is certainly an advantage for people who have pretty severe heat intolerance and need something that's very active. And generally, these have to be plugged into an outlet, so you're kind of restricted with that. Some systems do have a battery backup system, but that's not as powerful as being connected. So you're really not very mobile wearing these active systems. You kind of use them in your home, and and you use them as needed, sometimes 2 to 3 days. What also has been developed in the cooling circles is more of a passive cooling system, and that is basically a system that does not involve a pump or any moving parts, and that it does allow for more flexibility and more being able to be transportable. And the three main types of passive cooling are evaporative, phase change, and gel ice. And just a real quick overview of what these are. So evaporative would use water as its cooling effect. You probably have seen a lot of these garments in a variety of forms. The cooling products that for evaporative are mostly vests that you can have, or scarves, wristbands, bandanas. Basically, they have materials inside them that are crystal beads, most similar to what you would see have in disposable diapers, and you would immerse them in cool water, and the beads would expand and soak up the water, and then you would towel dry them, and then you would wear them over your clothing, and it would just naturally, as the garment dries and the water evaporates, it draws heat away from the body, which is the source of heat, and it naturally kind of evaporatively cools you. Now, as I mentioned, there's always pros and cons and advantages and disadvantages to products. As the evaporative products are very lightweight, they're easy to use and reuse, and generally they're very low cost. They're very cost effective. The disadvantages, with cooling, I guess the general rule of thumb is the more cooling energy you have, the better cooling result you're going to have. So products that use evaporative cooling and draw heat out of the body isn't really a strong cooling effect, and unfortunately, as Beth mentioned, the humidity definitely plays a factor in this. So if you are in a arid, dry climate, evaporative cooling can definitely be a benefit for you. If you're in the South, and where I am in New Jersey in the Northeast, it is definitely very humid in the summertime, and it generally doesn't work very well. The next type of cooling is called phase change. So it's not ice, and it's not water-soaked clothing. It's a little bit of a combination. So they are gel packs that are combined with water and a paraffin material that does not allow the pack to freeze at 32 degrees. It allows it to freeze at a higher temperature, around 57, 58 degrees. And again, the common products are vests, scarves, and wristbands. And what that does is it does allow people to be a little bit more mobile than before with the stationary plugged-in active suit, and it allows you to take a cooler with you and have that ice and those blue ice packs in the cooler and put these phase change gel packs in there, and you don't have to have the 32 degrees to cool it, because most coolers aren't going to get that low unless you're plugged into a refrigerator or freezer. You're not going to be freezing at 32 degrees. So if you're at 57, 58 degrees, you're still going to be able to actually freeze the pack. It will turn hard and frozen. It just won't be as cold as something that's frozen as 32 degrees. So again, with more ice time that you have and the colder it is, the more cooling energy you're going to get. So something that freezes at 32 degrees is going to cool longer and stay cooler longer than something at 58 to 60 degrees. But again, you don't have that option if you're out in the military, or you're working on a construction site and you bring a cooler along with you. Then you're able to get some cooling relief. The gel ice is the other passive system, and that uses a mixture of those water and starch, and it does freeze at 32 degrees. And the main products that you would see with this are the larger vests, the cooling vests that most people know of. And again, the advantage is that it does give you the most amount of cooling energy, so that if something freezes at 32 degrees, you're going to get up to 2 to 3 hours of cooling relief, depending on the environment. Obviously, something extremely hot isn't going to last as long if you're in the sun versus shade, if you're active versus just sitting at a picnic or a playground. So all of those affect the length of cooling that you have. And the disadvantages is that the vests that you wear for these can be a bit heavy to wear. Again, depending on the different manufacturer, they have different pockets that you can adapt, so you can put as 8 packs in, or take that down, make it 6, or maybe make it 4, whatever you feel you need at the time, versus that weight that you're wearing. So that is kind of that trade-off in terms of more cooling packs you have, the more cooling relief you're going to have, but it also is going to be some more weight that you have. So you kind of have to just individually judge that. So for over the years, MSAA has been very proud to be involved in the cooling program, initially with the research and the involvement with NASA, and then we moved into working with several different manufacturers who make these products, and we offer them all free of charge to our individual patients who qualify. And the application's on our website where people can call us and get it. And what we try to do is we try to be flexible with the products that we provide to people, as well as meeting their needs and trying to understand a little bit of fashion. We understand that this is really about being practical and keeping cool, but sometimes you want to look good too. So we try to look at designs that are smaller, lightweight, more discreet, so you can wear them under clothing versus over clothing. And that certainly can help if you're doing some exercises, or you're on the go, or you're at work and you're not comfortable letting others know that you have this issue and you're wearing a cooling vest. We get comments that the cooling vest is great, but it kind of looks like my dad's fishing jacket, and actually it does. But at the same time, it's designed that way to hold the most amount of those ice packs and give you that cooling relief. So what we've been trying to do is work with the manufacturers and stay trendy, if you will. So one of the manufacturers is Polar Products, and they came up with this fit kit that we now offer. So we like it. It's of the pictures on the screen. It's the torso vest on the far right that the lady is modeling. So it's more of a wraparound of your torso. It is smaller, and as a result, the ice packs are smaller, and as a result, you don't cool as much. But at the same time, it is something you can wear easier, more discreet, maybe wear it during exercise. So it gives you some of those trade-offs. You see the ankle wrap and the wrist wrap. Their products, again, they're smaller, but they're fairly strategically located. So if you are trying to cool some key areas, around the back of the neck is always helpful, the ankle, the wrists, and of course the torso. And then the last product in the center is another product. It's a undergarment vest by Steel, and that again is to be worn underneath clothing and to try to have as much cooling relief as you can with a vest, but have a vest that's smaller so that it's not as heavy and cumbersome. And with this, we've, as I mentioned, we have these needs. We've put some of these into place. We've combined them into kits so people can get the vest that's smaller, and to kind of make up for that, we'll also package it with the neck and wrist and ankle wraps so that they can have some of those other products that can help them on the go, exercising, or you can wear the whole ensemble and be cool. And as I mentioned, we have our applications on our website, and certainly people can call our toll-free number and speak with us about that. So at that point, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Beth.
Okay.
Oops,
We both turned it. All right. So where do you go from here? We've talked a lot about devices. We've talked about techniques. It's time for you to develop your personal cooling program. So what you're going to do is take some of the information that we've talked about tonight and maybe do some research, do some planning. Pick a couple of things that you want to try, be it a few lifestyle changes, a few products, and see how they work. Evaluate them for fit and feasibility in your life, and then keep what works and change what doesn't. And in the midst of all this, if you get stuck or you just say, you know, I need help, I need someone else to help me figure out what's working and not working, is utilizing the resources around you. Talk to people in your healthcare team, whether there's a occupational physical therapist that you can work with, or if you have a nurse practitioner, someone with a local or national chapter or an association. Talking with the local vendors and resource programs that could help provide some of these things or funding for these things. And then are there any government programs in your area that you could get some resource help from? We also included links to several of the national societies and foundations that can help with ideas and other types of changes and definitely some funding and then I always like to put this slide in the end of any talk that I do is remember that you can do, and that living with MS is all about finding solutions. And today we're talking about solutions for heat sensitivity. So use your creativity to remove the obstacles. Let go of those things that no longer serve you and accept those that will make life easier. Remember, you are in control, so work to stay there. The quality of your life depends on it. We're going to do a final poll, and this talks about will you incorporate or continue to use any of the below cooling devices. So if everyone could weigh in on their thoughts. I'm giving it some time to come in.
Not too many for cooling vests above clothing.
No, I think everybody's fashion sense is there.
I think so. I think we're onto something. And I think the trend for people to exercise with MS and to pre-cool and to post-cool, I think that also lends itself to the smaller wristbands and ankle bands that people wear, and I think people do get a lot of benefit from that.
Cool, yeah, so everyone liked the combination of items, the cooling wristbands or scarves. Yeah, I can see that. I think those can go everywhere when we talk about our fashion sense a little more than some of the others, but definitely it's a prescription of different things, and you can utilize different devices for different types of challenges. Okay, so now we're headed to the question and answer session. Let me go back because I always have this trouble of flipping through before we see the colors. So that's how it turned out.
Wow, that's
I know.
You know, and I didn't know what to expect with that, but that's great. Thank you all for answering that. And we have gotten some wonderful questions, and you know, both of you feel free to chime in. Let me get started here. The first one I have is, are there cooling devices for plus-size people?
I'll take the lead on that. The products that we offer are adjustable. There are Velcro straps on each side that allow for a pretty flexible fit on that. And then the other products that we carry are sized fairly well. They're zipper-style vests. They're small, medium, large, extra large. And even with them, they do have Velcro sides that adjust. So for the most part, there's a size that does work for most people. And if it's something that we aren't able to offer, certainly people can contact the manufacturers that we deal with or others that are out there and try to get something that best suits them.
Great. Thank you. Another question that I have is, although I always have fluids with me, I no longer sweat. What can I do to reinstate this function?
Different people eliminate in different ways. And sometimes you say, I always have fluids with me, but you still wonder how hydrated you actually are, because a lot of different things impact hydration. And so I definitely talk with a physician about that. There are different interventions that they could potentially provide that may help you with it. But just because you have fluids doesn't mean you're getting enough. And then obviously there's functions within your body that can interfere with the sweating and sweating. So I would actually take that to a physician.
Okay, thank you. Another question that I have here is any suggestions for keeping your pillow cool? We've actually had quite a few questions on sleeping and keeping cool. This person said they tried the Chillo, I guess one of those infomercial items, and it did not work. So they're wondering what suggestions can help with staying cool at night.
Well, I'll try to address that. We actually have had that question posed to us a lot, and we actually did work with one of our vendors to actually have a cooling pillowcase developed. We, at the moment, because of budget limitations, we don't still offer that as part of our kit. We'd like to. It just and it has been very popular. But what it is, it's a soft ice pack, so it doesn't freeze hard. And you can it's a pillowcase that has pockets sewn into it so that you can put soft ice packs in there. And again, there's always this trade-off between, how much cooling energy and how much cooling relief you can get out. So something that is not going to freeze hard at 32 degrees obviously isn't going to give you the maximum cooling. However, something that can freeze soft at maybe 55 degrees still is definitely going to provide cooling relief, because your body temperature is 98.6. The room temperature, unless it's in the middle of the summer and there's no air conditioning, for the most part, room temperature is going to be 70 degrees. So naturally, anything that's less than your body temperature, a pillow, a blanket, the sheets, it just does feel cooler. And then you add something that's around 55 degrees on top of that, you definitely get a fair amount of cooling relief. So the one vendor that we work with that does have that is Polar Products, and their website is polarsoftice.com. And in fairness, we also work with another great vendor, and they're Steel Vest, and their website is Steel Vest, and that's STEELE vest.com. So there's a lot of other different great manufacturers out there. These are the two particular ones we work with, and they have great websites and a lot of great products. You can check them out.
Great, thank you. Quite a few people tonight seem to be commenting on living in a hot and humid area. Are there any specific suggestions for, I guess, beating the humidity or dealing with overheating and the humidity?
Well, I think as Peter was talking about, there's the different properties of how the cooling products work is going to be the key to figure out which ones of those to try, because you aren't able to use the evaporative devices as successfully as someone living in a different type of climate. So I would go towards those gel ice or those packet type, the wristbands and the ankles and the stuff that actually have the gel packs in there for you.
Okay.
And definitely try to avoid the evaporative. Those products really do not work very well in high humidity, and actually add an extra layer of clothing that you don't need.
And then in general, it's going to be really key to watch that heat index, and because that talks about the humidity and the heat and what the temperature would feel like to that person. Plan accordingly to try to stay out of the heat as much. Utilize those air conditioning. Definitely stay out of the sunlight and balance as much as you can in those ways as well, so that you're just not exposing yourself to that. If you're an early bird, it's great, because the early morning and the late evenings are going to be the better times to be out doing things. So if you're either an early morning or night owl, that's helpful. I know people that grocery shop at 10 o'clock at night just because it's a heck of a lot cooler and it's not as crowded.
Sure. Makes sense. Another question here is how to keep cooling devices in place during activities involving movement. I think we have some active people on this webinar.
Well, the Fit Kit is really designed for that, so it's a fairly tight fit around your torso with that type of wrap around. And then, of course, the ankle and wrist wraps fit fairly snug around those parts. The vests themselves, that's a little harder to do because obviously it's not going to be really super tight around your torso, and there's going to be a little bit of movement and flexibility. So again, there's kind of checks and balances in terms of what the products are capable of doing, what you want to get out of them, what you're able to do. So maybe if it is a case where you're exercising, maybe try to pre-cool and try to wear one of the cooling vests with the most amount of ice packs in it to get the most amount of cooling, and then maybe take off the vest and be a little bit more free in range of motion, and then put the vest back on when your exercise is done. So that you can kind of experiment and see what works for you and try to do your best with that.
Great, thank you. Another question that I have here is and I guess there are a few people that have gone through the MSAA cooling program. Would they be eligible again if they applied? And I know that's probably a case-by-case basis, but
well, our general rule of thumb is that it's a 5-year wait period for reorders. And we deal, again, with great manufacturers. They manufacture their own products in-house with everything, the apparel, the seamstress, everybody's in-house. They make their own packs. So they have great quality control, and their products really do last a long time. And if cared properly and treated well, the vests will certainly exceed more than 5 years of use. And the ice packs, for the most part, can go up to 5 years, maybe a little bit longer. If they're stored over the non-cooling season in hot temperatures, they are going to have a heat transfer loss that'll make them slightly less effective. So really keeping them in the freezer at all times in the cooling season and out is really the best way to maintain the level of cooling in the packs. But we'll try to work with people, and if it's a need that they can't get from another resource and they can't afford it, then we'll try to look into that. But as you can imagine, these are very popular programs that we have, and there's a very high demand for them. And with these economic times, our budgets are pretty limited. So we try to help as many new people as possible, and then look to be flexible and reserve others that we've helped in the past.
Great, thank you. The next question I have is, how can you tell if your overheating has reached a dangerous stage, and what would maybe be the quickest way to get cooled down?
Well, there are incidences of heat stroke that people feel, and that definitely can happen to anyone. The biggest thing is to remember that if you're starting to feel dizzy, if you feel faint or you feel weak, that you need to get yourself out of the sun as much as they can. Drink some cold water, get some cold packs on you, and really try to bring that core temperature down as fast as you can. And that would be, if it was an emergent type situation and you really were starting to have some physical symptoms, that I would call 911 and have someone come give you some medical attention.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for maybe one or two just last questions. One that I have here is it recommended that MS patients wear medical ID bracelets? For example, this person's thinking with a heat-related issue.
In my experience, I've found that for individuals with MS, it's helpful to have a bracelet or a card or something that you carry with them that talks about some of the frequent symptoms that you experience and explains it. A lot of times doctors' offices will do that because you just never know. You get in scenarios where people don't understand, or if they can't seem to conceptualize it or see it, they don't understand it. And that way it's easy for you to present that and help explain things without you having to do all the talking.
Thank you. Last question here. A couple of people asked about airport security. For example, can I take cooling packs through security in my carry-on if they are frozen? Or do you think they would be able to go through?
For the most part, for the most part, we have not had a problem with that. We have posed this question to the different manufacturers of products, and both the vest, the way it looks, and then the ice packs, not having people be familiar with them. There have been concerns by MS patients that would be an issue, but from all accounts that is not an issue, and if it is, they can certainly explain what it is. Generally, the company's label is on it so that it looks and feels like a product that is retail and not something that's questionable. And again, if you do have the ID bracelet or any type of indication that you have MS, then that certainly helps explain the situation.
Great. We really appreciate that, and thank you for taking the time this evening. This has been a great presentation, but we are running out of time here. So I wanted to also say thank you to all the participants who took part in the webinar this evening. We had a great turnout. Our next webinar is going to be on June the 12th at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and the topic will be traveling with MS. And we have a completely new format for our webinars. 2 to 3 experts present, 1 topic for discussion, and 0 charge to you. So join us live from the convenience of your home or office at no charge for an in-depth discussion on topics relating to exercise, nutrition, communication, symptom management, and total health. This unique webinar series provides insight from more than 1 MS expert so you can gain additional knowledge relating to MS. You can interact with our team of Can-Do MS consultants, ask questions, and learn how to adopt healthy lifestyle behaviors, actively co-manage your MS, and live your best life. You could register for this and other webinars, again, at www.mscando.org. And for those who took part live tonight, as soon as the presentation is over, you'll see a survey appear on your computer screen. Please take a moment to complete the survey and help us continue to improve our webinars. We value your feedback and your input. Again, thank you to Beth and Peter, and also to everyone who joined us this evening. Have a wonderful night.